Well, hello, folks. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, your friendly neighborhood Christian whistleblower. I was going to say favorite. I guess that would work as well. Your favorite and your friendly and probably your only Christian whistleblower. So I am glad tonight to have a special show for you. We've got a couple of great guests, Richard and Namaste. They have a great website, which is called richardandnamaste.com, I believe. Let me take a quick look. Yes, richardandnamaste.com. They're all about passion, polarity, purpose, presence, school of alchemy, all kinds of good stuff. And we'll be diving into that in just a couple of minutes. Let me just talk to you first of all. Remember tonight on Coast to Coast AM, my good friend George Norrie is going to be expanding our mass consciousness mantra and exercise regarding the storm Irma. George will be directing a mass consciousness event tonight where he will lead, guide, direct the audience of Coast to Coast, which normally numbers into the millions, to spread their good intention towards the storm, encouraging Irma to go over deep waters, encouraging Irma to stop, downgrade her winds and her destructive force, and to stop being a threat to people. If I know George, I think he's listening to us, and I'm sure he'll do the right thing and do a lot of good direction and a lot of good positive intention. And just so you know, that storm is, even though it's relatively close, it's probably not going to hit Florida until Sunday. So there is plenty of time between now and then for us to continue our mantras at 11 after the hour, speaking to Irma, to get her to move, to get her to not go over land, and to get her to peace be still, just like the Christ did. So that's what our job is. That's what our plan is. That's what our purpose is as regards to that. I hope that you'll like and share and subscribe to the channel while you're here. If you're a guest, we're glad to have you. If you're family, we're glad to see you again. And I'm going to do my best here to try with my technological skills to bring on Richard and Namaste. And I know that I have to promote them. And let's see if we can do that. I just unmuted them, and now I'm going to make it so they can start their video. Hello, folks. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. It's very nice to meet you.
Hello. There we are.
Hello.
Let me adjust this just a little bit. We didn't know how it was going to show up.
Take your time. I like you already. I love to see people with a bunch of books in their house. I know they're deep thinkers. I know they're people that are curious, and I know they're people that have read some things and have experienced some things that I can learn from. So Namaste, Richard, welcome to our channel. It's our pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's our pleasure to be here.
It is definitely our pleasure to be here.
Now, I want to get one thing straight right from the start. Namaste, I understand that in your world, Richard is a king. And Richard, I understand in your world that Namaste is a queen. Is that correct? Tell us about that.
Yes, that is correct. She is my queen. And one of the things that we talk about in our teachings is the concept of noblesse oblige, right? Which is the obligation of royalty to act nobly in a noble fashion.
Yes.
And when we talk to people, whatever they have under their control in terms of their relationship, their household, their family, all of that, energetically, spiritually, physically, etc., is under their control, under their charge. And what happens in that kingdom, so to speak, is it prospers or doesn't prosper depending on the folks that are in it. So we believe that it's, words are containers for meaning, and it's important for us to actually use those terms that describe the relationship that we believe that we have. And so,
yeah, it's a way of, in a world where everything seems to be pushing towards, let's make things as base and as low as we possibly can, we actually encourage the elevation. And by elevating, you know, if you look at your partner and you see them as royalty, then that can influence how you interact with them.
Yes.
What you believe about them, and even the power in them that you want to speak to, even when you're being challenged. So yeah, that's how we interact.
So it's far more than just a cute pet name.
Right. Yeah. Yes, for us, it is far more. It is truly far more.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I love that concept, folks. You talk about the responsibility of royalty to act regally, and it's very easy for us, I think, in our world, in any type of a social setting or context, whether it's within our family unit, whether it's within our circle of friends, whether it's within our employment, or whether it's within circles like this, that folks that we choose to interact with. It's something that hit me was the fact that it's not only all of them out there that have responsibility, but we have personal responsibility for ourselves. And I'm very impressed and very touched by the fact that I need to learn to act regally, royally. I need to learn to act right. And then it's like the Christ said, love yourself and love your neighbors as yourself. And he said those are the two laws that everything else hangs on. So I think it's very a real correlation of what you're talking about. I think you've discovered something very powerful there.
Yes, I mean, it definitely works for us. And whenever we talk to other people about it, they begin to notice a shift in their relationships. Like, we don't tell people that they have to, you know, but the invitation is always extended. And a lot of times in relationships, if they've been long-standing, you know, we'll hear the partner say, you know, I don't really know if I don't want to call my partner that. And we go, okay, no. And then, but inevitably at some point, as they're doing that relationship alchemy, that relationship work, they'll start saying, you know what, no, I want to see my partner like that. And I feel like there's something there for me. And the most interesting thing happens is that when they begin to see each other, each person independently looking at themselves and saying, do I want to honor my partner? Do I want to elevate them a bit? The partner steps up. Right. You know, and that's the thing that's always curious to me. It's like, I speak to, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of women, and they'll say, you know, yeah, I called him king and he just was like, all of a sudden, all the things that I had been wanting him to do, all of a sudden he started doing it. Now, I don't tell women to do that to try to get him to do it, but it is a nice little perk. You know, it is a fringe benefit, you know, is that when you speak to the heart and to a person's greatness, you begin to activate that Christ consciousness within. I really do believe that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, there is a belief that faith is the substance of things hoped for, and it's the evidence of things not yet seen. So maybe somebody's saying, you don't know my husband, you don't know my wife, but I do know the power of spiritual alchemy, and I do know the power of faith. I do know the power of confession. I do know the power of words and frequency and harmonics. And sometimes, like you said, Namaste, I think that's profound. If you start calling him a king, all of a sudden he's going to get that resonance. He's going to get that frequency. And Namaste, I know this never happens, but if Richard was to do something at some point that might be irritated you a little bit, I know that never happens, but how does that idea of seeing him as a king affect those little situations that come up potentially in other people's relationships, not y'all's, from time to time?
The way it affects that is that it means that even when I am challenged, even when there's something going on and there's some conflict, I never diminish his stature in my own eyes. And there's a way, it's like the example that I use is that even if you are in court and someone is accusing you of something, you know how to behave, you know how to conduct yourself, you know that there's a certain degree of gravitas that you need to bring to that situation, regardless of how you feel. You know that there's a way to behave in front of the judge and even with police officers and so on. And in the same way, when you are calling, you know, your partner a king or a queen, then that means that even if I'm upset, there's certain things I'm not going to say. There are certain ways I'm not going to engage with him. So even if he says, you know, even if he says something and it hurts my feelings, then I'm going to, you know, feel what I'm feeling and communicate it, but communicate it with a word that we don't hear very often, which is respect. You know, I'm going to communicate with him with respect, respect for myself as a queen, but also respect for him as a king, that, you know what, it's not appropriate for me to just go off on him. He's not a child, and I wouldn't treat my children. We have 8 children. I wouldn't treat them that way. We have a dog. I don't treat my dog that way. So I'm definitely not going to treat him that way, you know? Right. And so it's a reminder, becomes this reminder, even in times of stress, that I still have this great privilege of spending my life with royalty.
And Richard, it has to be a source of true inspiration and true power in your life. I mean, we all live in this same world, and every now and then things don't go our ways. We can have bad days, we can have challenges, we can have difficulties, we can even face trials and tests and temptations. And it has to be a real source of strength to you to know that there's a beautiful woman, a lovely person that not only calls you a king, but believes that you're a king. And you can rise up, and sometimes if you don't want to act like a king, you can remember that you are royalty, and you can be the king that you know that you are. And even if sometimes you question your own royalty, you can be the king that you know that Namaste sees you as being. That must be a real source of power in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. One of the things that the masculine thrives on is respect. And when we have taught on this and taught to couples, many times we don't give each other exactly what is needed, right? And I tell people, you know, I tell the feminine when we are teaching couples, you know, have you ever articulated to him and actually said these words, I respect you? Like, grab his face and look in his face and say, I respect you. And watch the transformation that happens. You know, he sits up a little taller. He's got some bass in his voice at that point. There's literally nothing that he cannot do with her support and respect behind him. And so it energizes me. It energizes our relationship. And it is a reminder, even because nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. But one of the things that we also say is wrong king is still king, despite what we tend to occupy in terms of like our society.
Right, because we're a democracy. So in our country, a wrong king is not a king anymore. No.
You see that in all kinds of occupations. You know, if you're a sportscaster, one word can derail your career. One misstatement, that's it, you're done. But one of the things about royalty is that you can be wrong and still occupy the throne. In fact, it's essential that you right the wrong, not abdicate the throne, because as the king goes, so goes the kingdom. So yeah, so that's really, really important. And it makes you want to measure up both internally and externally.
And I'm fascinated because not only does it really bring a sense of responsibility to you as people, but it also gives you a very firm and strong foundation for not only your relationship, but your life as a whole.
Yes, yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. We believe that your relationship can be the strongest source in your life if you allow it. Second only to your relationship with the all that is, with the I am.
Absolutely.
And so when we have this partnership and it's rooted and it's grounded and it's strong and it's fulfilling, then yeah, there literally is nothing we cannot do. And it gives you that kind of firm foundation. Like, things happen, storms happen, physically, right, yeah, you know, metaphorically and real, you know, yeah, storms happen. And how do you handle that? Well, we know this. And so we call this whole idea positional awareness. Because when you have positional, it's our desire as humans. One of the things that gives our lives meaning is our sense of place, knowing where we belong. And yet in our relationships, as we've become a more modern culture, we've eroded many of the things that showed us where we belonged, what our roles were. And in one hand, there's this sense of freedom. I'm free from that. But on the other hand, what I have found, and it really surprised me in my research with women and working with women, is that lack of place meant that both people tend to feel like they have to do everything. Yeah. And so because everybody feels like they have to do everything, no one knows what the other person is supposed to do. And then there just becomes these expectations that nobody knows about. You end up in what we call, the technical term is a hot mess. And So we call this positional awareness, which is if you know what your position is, if you know what your place is in the relationship, then it gives you a place to excel. It gives your partner space to appreciate you because what you do is yours to do. It gives you space to appreciate them. And it also makes your relationship very solid, you know, because you're fitting together in a complementary way. And so that's what we teach, is that positional awareness. So Richard,
I don't know if you folks have the capability, but the chat room is saying that your volume is a little low. I don't know if you could turn up your volume at all. But the one thing that I'm impressed with among, no, Bubba, that's a little better.
You want to turn up all the way?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'll turn it up.
Let's see how
all the way.
Better?
That's better.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, one thing that you mentioned that I find very important is the concept of respect. You gave the analogy of the courtroom. And there's a decorum. There's a way that you have to act within the courtroom. And this idea of your positional, your place and your positional, holding your position. How can we take these wonderful transformational concepts beyond the marriage relationship and take them into our social situations as a whole?
Oh.
Or can we?
Yes, we absolutely can. And that's what we teach in terms of like our School of Alchemy, because all these things are connected. How you treat other people, it's like what you put out into the universe, you receive that echo back. You know, and if you are, for instance, if you're extremely judgmental, then you will find yourself constantly in situations where people are judging you. But people never make that connection. They just, look at the external and say, well, people are constantly doing this to me without actually looking at themselves and saying, you know what? I am responsible for this. What do I want to do if I want to get more money, right, in my life? I need to give that which I want to receive.
Yes.
So if I'm looking at, somebody on the street who's asking for $1 and I'm withholding that from them, I don't think that that's connected to the promotion that I'm trying to get at work, but it absolutely is.
Right. Yes.
It absolutely is.
Yes.
So it's easy to see the connections if we're willing to take responsibility for our own lives instead of seeing ourselves as a constant victim of circumstance.
Exactly.
Now, one of our guests asked very politely, but you can kind of see the undertone. They say, "This sounds great in a perfect world." How would you respond to that?
The way I would respond to that is that it sounds great in a perfect world if we are expecting other people to act like we think they ought to. But we don't live in that world. We live in that world where each of these slices of divinity have their own path and their own way of going through the world. So we have no control over that. So what do we have control over? I have control over how I show up and what I do and how I speak to people and how I treat other people. And if I'm willing to have the courage to step out and try to do that, because many times we aren't, right? We try to hedge our bets. We're like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. When they start treating me better, I mean, how many times have folks thought about all the magnanimous and all of the wonderful things they would do if they, in fact, won the lottery, right? And then as soon as I win, everybody's going to be so happy because I'm just going to give money out. But you know what? Let's say you don't win. What are you going to do then? What do you have control over? You have control over the $5 in your pocket. What are you going to do with that? If we do that and take responsibility and have the courage to do it before we see it, then we can get that return stroke from the universe. Then we can get that echo that comes back to us. But as long as we have the mindset that says, show me first, and then I'll change, we're going to be waiting a cool minute.
Absolutely, we are. And one thing that I hear from you, and if I'm not accurate, let me know. It seems like one of the things that is underlying what you're communicating is that the feminine has certain strengths and the feminine has some things that maybe it needs some assistance. The male has strengths and has some certain things that need assistance. And I hear you saying it's okay to be feminine. It's okay to be masculine. It's okay not to think you have to be both. And it's okay to understand and respect that each has its own powers and each has places where it needs to be helped. So we're not all alike. We don't have to be all alike. What we have to do is learn how to interface with one another. Am I on the right track with that?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We believe that, we are not meant to be a monoculture. When you look at nature, a monoculture where you're just growing the same thing over and over and over again, it weakens the plants, it weakens the system, and eventually it weakens everything, right? So we need diversity. Diversity is healthy. And that diversity is not just about saying there are many different types, but about understanding, respecting, and valuing our distinctions. So that's why we call it complementary polarity, meaning as opposed to oppositional polarity. A lot of people think that if we're on two different sides, that means we are opposing or adversarial to one another. That's not necessarily true. We are complements to one another, and that makes us stronger. And so that means that anything we touch is also strengthened by our strength. And that's why we offer that. And I think it does go beyond relationships. It goes into everything. You know, if we're willing to be who we are and also complement those who are not as we are, and value them and appreciate them, then things get better. But it does begin with that personal responsibility. I'm only responsible for what I do.
Right.
You know?
And why do you think the oppositional position is so dominant in our culture now? Why is it always us versus them?
Yes, we've had a lot of conversations about this. And I really do think that we've divorced ourselves from our connection with spirit. We've become very much in touch with the intellect over or the mental over the spiritual, as opposed to the mental as a way of communicating the spiritual. And so what happens is our mental faculties, basically, when left to their own devices, become horrible masters because they're fabulous servants.
It's a fabulous servant, horrible master. One of the things that we advocate is love over everything. And when people hear that initially, it takes them aback a little bit, because we live in a society now where love is synonymous with weakness, right?
Yes.
Love over everything. Well, wait a minute. How can you advocate for yourself? People are going to take advantage of you. People are going to do this. There is a strength and a power in love that is greater than any other force in this world. But we have to, again, it keeps coming back to that courage. We have to have the courage to actually adopt that and see what's there for us. And then once we do, a lot of good things start to happen.
Yeah, so we're conditioned to basically believe it's a us versus them, that there's not enough. You know, so if there's not enough, if you have a lack belief, then of course that's going to lead to us versus them, because there's not enough. So there's got to be a us versus them.
Right. Got more than I do. Therefore, you know, something needs to happen so I can be taken care of. And that's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way.
It is. And as we transition a little bit to the idea of alchemy, I'm just thinking, and let's just suspend disbelief for a moment. Let's just pretend that we're not on Earth anymore, but we're out in the universe on some other planet. And, you know, we're human people. We're on some other planet. We've been away from Earth for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 10 years. And we've been interacting with these other beings. They're very nice. You know, they're very kind to us. We have a good relationship with them. But all of a sudden, one day, after being away from Earth for many, many years, amongst these other beings, we see another human. And after all this time, I'm convinced that if we saw another human, we wouldn't be, oh, look, there's a black person, there's a white person, there's a Mexican person, there's an Asian person. We would be, look, there's another human.
Exactly.
Do we have to go to another planet to be able to get to this place?
You know, I've often said, probably since I was in high school, that, you know, nothing would unify the human race more than, you know, a low-key, low-grade alien invasion. You know? We would instantly, you know, our petty squabbles would evaporate in a heartbeat, and we'd be all about taking care of the person next to us, because we don't want to end up being dinner for something else. You know?
Absolutely. You know? And I've been in the military, and I know in the foxhole, there is no black, white, Asian. It's all one, you know, brotherhood, sisterhood all together. So, you know, you hate to think that it would take a foxhole experience for us. Hopefully we could, you know, maybe become to appreciate each other without that. But since we're talking about alchemy, turning fear into power, turning us versus them into there is no them, only us. Talk to us about alchemy, and talk to us about what this school of alchemy that you folks have really is.
Well, the School of Alchemy, first of all, alchemy is the science of transformation, as that you spoke to. changing one thing into another, that transmuting energy. And what we have discovered and what we have done is tried to take these ancient principles and ancient ways of looking at energy and looking at our place in the universe and translating those for a modern audience, so that people can actually utilize these tools to change their lives for the better.
Yes, we found that a lot of people, for instance, were interested in certain things like magic or, you know, affirmations, entelechy, you know, things of that nature, and sigils, talismans, all kinds of stuff. But when it came to making them practical, like actually utilizing it to do something, it was just like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, but they couldn't see where it could be applicable at, or they would feel, you know, some degree of limitation because of, you know, something that they were taught as far as their belief structure growing up, where they were scared of offending, you know, God or something like that. And so we, you know, we have a background in ministry. We're both ordained when we were in our teens, actually. And so we studied many different schools of thought, many different ways of being, a lot of the ancient wisdoms from different sacred texts and things of that nature. And so we wanted to synthesize it and make it accessible, make it usable. So we teach the principle, and then we teach also how to apply it to your business and how you can apply it in the rest of your life. So that includes your relationships, your parenting, whatever it is that you're doing in your life. So say, take law of attraction, which is huge by itself. It's way more than one class, right? So we'll teach some of the principles of law of attraction, and then we'll say, okay, now this is where you use that principle. These are some ways you can use it in your business. It's a group coaching format. So our students can ask questions and tell us what they're doing, and then we can help direct them and facilitate them finding the answers and see where they want to play with it. And apply it almost like in a laboratory kind of thing. Use your life as a laboratory is what we said. And then the same thing in their relationship, you know, so like you were saying, you know, oh, if the person isn't doing, that's a perfect example of a place where you would utilize that. Okay, well, what do you want to believe? What do you want to experience with your love? You know, and these are some practical ways that you can apply it. And so that's how we do it in the School of Alchemy. In our belief system, alchemy is a way of life. It's not just something you do. It impacts and affects and even infects the way you look at the world. You know, in any situation, you're always looking for that opportunity to release the quintessence or to release the divine, the truth, the reality, the love in that situation. So instead of just seeing it as this is bad, you start looking at it and saying, okay, but where's the good? Where's the God in it? You know? Yeah.
And how do you encourage people that do come from a more conservative religious background to, even though they feel that pull and that desire to move into some of these more spiritual areas, how do you suggest people deal with that part that says, if you do that, you're going to go to hell. If you do that, you're going to get struck by a lightning bolt. How do you get outside the dominant religious paradigm to embrace greater spirituality?
I believe in expanding the tent, meaning that, you know, it's not, again, not that opposition, you know, but it's embracing, because all of the different religions all have as their underpinning love. And when we're told something different, where it's about punishment, it's about, you know, God waiting outside the door with a huge cosmic hammer to watching you and seeing what you're going to do wrong. It's like, that's really what we're talking about when folks have that internal fear. And we know that, you know, that the divine is not the author of that kind of fear and trepidation. And so I encourage people to examine that, what you're feeling, you know, and once we get down to that fear, and then, you know, pour some love on that, and that fear will start to dissipate. And also we use a lot of real world examples.
Yes, we do.
Like we had a situation just recently where we had a break-in in our vehicle, and a laptop and a bunch of electronics and stuff like that. Just poof, gone. What we did immediately when we found out about it is that we did a broadcast in which we talked about the alchemy of forgiveness and the alchemy of blessing.
Yeah,
we actually you know, and we had 1,000 people on there, and we actually blessed the person that did that, because we recognize everybody's doing the best they can. And in their value structure, that was their highest and best at the time, right? I need this, and you can just get another one. So they took it. But what I wanted that to do in terms of an alchemical standpoint is to actually charge that item with forgiveness and with transformation, that it would be a pivot point for that person's life, that they would be encouraged to come up another level higher. That's not just the best that they can do, they can do better than that.
Blessing them with honesty and truthfulness and things like that. So that's the kind of things that we teach. And when a person is, because that's our background, is a very conservative Christian background. And one of the things that I encourage is, I always say, well, go and just read the teachings of the Christ, not Paul, not other people, just what Jesus said, and then come talk to me, because they will often get, if they can put a little space between the dogma, and the doctrine that maybe they have been conditioned to believe, and actually go back to Christ, which is what Christian comes from, then they might be able to get a little freedom. But we recognize that those aren't things that happen in one fell swoop. For a lot of people, it's a slow unfurling, and so we give them absolute love and let them take their time with it, and tell them, just only do what you feel comfortable with, and eventually they get there.
Yeah, that's such a great point that you make, Namaste. And, it's interesting because you folks are all about, being gentle and loving and caring and nurturing. And sometimes I'm a little more inspirational, shall we say. I'm a little more, it's different, but the synthesis together can be fantastic. And I'm seeing a lot in the chat room. I'm seeing relationship problems. And I want to ask you, number one, what can someone do if they want to go to Richard and Namaste.com, if they want to look at the School of Alchemy? What can they do if they're in a place that they interpret as a bad place in their relationships? And I've seen a couple of other comments that really sparked that I align with, that say, you know what, the first thing you have to do, and I'm paraphrasing, is make sure you fall in love with you and you get yourself all set up and not look for someone to complete you. I mean, Tom Cruise and Renee Welliger, or whatever her name is, really messed us up when Tom Cruise said, "You complete me." Because that's really not true, is it?
Right.
No, that's really not true. It's like, we're singular entities, right? But when, like you always say, I'm a movement by myself, but we're a force and we're together.
Right?
Say that again, please.
I'm a movement by myself, but we're a force when we're together.
Oh, I like it.
There's power here, singularly, but we become more than the sum of our parts when we come together, because when we come together, it's not just he and I, it's he and I and the great mystery, and so then there's this other synergy that comes to play. I believe that is each of our individual responsibilities to do our own work, internal work, in learning to love ourselves as much as possible. I also believe that there are some things we can do alone, and then there's some work that we won't do until we come together. And because it requires the reflection of another person in our space for us to do that work. So it's like, it's easy to say, yes, I have done the work. I know how to love. Yeah. And then when you have someone that's like right here, do you really? Right. Can you really love?
Because I guarantee you, I come equipped with a very unique set of skills, right? And those skills are going to rub you in exactly the way, in the area that you probably need to be polished, as Rumi would say, right? Yeah. So you can't do that by yourself.
No.
You're not going to say in your head what I will probably say to you, whether on accident or on purpose, and feel that internal ouch, but recognize that ouch is something that I need to deal with,
right,
and not necessarily reflect it back on you and say, you need to stop saying that to me, whatever.
Right. And I think that the wisdom of that has somewhat, it's kind of falling away. I'm noticing it falling away to obscurity, where people think that, well, if I do enough work, and if he has done enough work, and if we've done enough work apart, then once we get together, it'll just be
perfect.
And it's like, well, no, because there is the aspect of growing together, and there is also how we catalyze each other. And if it happens outside, of course, it's going to happen here. Every person I meet is my teacher. and I'm learning something from them, and I am greater because of my connection with that other aspect of divinity. Well, how much more so here? You know, I've joined my life with someone, which means that we are constantly growing. And so sometimes that growth can be a wee bit uncomfortable, you know, but that doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong. It just means that it's growth. It's a growth opportunity, you know, and we need to learn that.
Yeah, working that can be painful initially.
Yeah.
But as it gets stronger,
eventually it gets to a point where it's like, okay, yeah, that's kind of uncomfortable, but it's just growth.
Yeah.
Now, Richard, earlier you talked about taking someone's face in your hands and telling them that you respect them, you know, communicating your good intention to them. What do you both say to the person, the couple that is in the midst of the fire right now? Things are really bad, and they're to the point where if the lady took the man's face to try to tell him that she respected him, he'd be probably afraid she was going to headbutt him. What do you do with people in that situation? What do you recommend? Because we both know, all three of us know, there's folks like that in that situation right now.
Absolutely. What I would suggest to them, and what I would offer to them, is something extremely simple. When, to use an example out of the animal kingdom, you know, if you have a herd of wildebeest and they're trying to protect the young that are, you know, the tender ones, right? Their safety of the herd is measured by the distance between them. And so when people are really in that space, what do we do most often? We go to our respective corners, we drift apart, we don't actually touch. And what I tell people to do is something very simple. It's also counterintuitive, and it may be very difficult at first, but you need to, at minimum, hold hands when you're having that tense discussion. See if you can get a little bit closer. You know, it's like you need to physically be touching with each other, because it's the same thing. You need to understand this on the physical level. You know, the intensity of the thing is going to be measured, and it's going to sustain itself by the distance, the space between us. So if we can cut down on that space, we can actually remove that charge, that energy. And if we can do that, then we can find ourselves at a space where we can actually communicate instead of defending ourselves or our respective position.
And it's not just a philosophy or a theory. That actually works on the physiologic level or the biologic level as well, because when we get upset and we're arguing, we get into fight or flight, which says that I either need to run away or I need to fight against this person, at which point you cease to be rational. Even when you think you are no longer seeking to connect with your partner and to collaborate with them. You seeing them as the enemy or as someone you need to get away from.
You have to defend yourself.
But when you get close and you're touching them, you're literally reprogramming your body to say that this is a safe space for me. I don't have to be in fight or flight with this person. And so it immediately begins to, even if you're kind of stiffy at first, hormonally, you know, with all the chemicals that's going on in your body, everything starts to relax a little bit. And now you can actually begin to make some progress. And it's incredibly effective.
It really is. And I work with people every day in working through their analytical mind and removing gaps and actually removing places where that fight or flight, that reptilian part, I call it the reactive mind, will jump up and override your analytical mind. And it is very, very important to do exactly what you said. And when we're talking alchemy, yes, alchemy can be transmuted across space and across time, but the very best and most effective and quickest transmutation of energy and power and alchemy is to be in physical contact and to be in physical touch. And the last thing that your fight or flight wants you to do is actually extend your hand, because there's no comfort, there's no healing, there's nothing remarkable in your comfort zone. So to extend your hand and to just have that physical connection. And it really does. The alchemy goes through, the energy goes through, the frequency goes through, the harmony goes through. And then your analytical mind is able to say, oh, this person doesn't have any ill will towards me. Right. You can put down that fight or flight. And now you're back to a place where you still have a disagreement, but it's not us versus them anymore. It's a place where we can actually begin to work together. Now, do you recommend that outside of the marriage relationships? If people are in a disagreement at work or among friends, should they start off with a handshake?
Sometimes,
Yeah,
you know,
sometimes I think that can
sometimes
work.
that can really work. I like to suggest always starting with what can you give?
Mm-hmm.
What can you offer to that other person? A lot of times we tend to, when we're in a place of stress or conflict, or we're feeling oppositional towards another person, we do see them as the enemy. We don't want to give them anything. You know, we feel like any sign, that's a sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. And so when you begin to say, okay, what can I offer? What do they need? What can I offer to them in this moment that leaves me whole and yet is a good faith gesture? What can, maybe it's just listening instead of interrupting. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe it's, you know, looking at them and allowing your gaze to become compassionate towards them instead of critical towards them.
Right.
You know, just sitting there and holding them in the gaze of compassion, and things like that. So those are all very internal things, and yet it impacts how you see that person, you know, because the first thing we do a lot of times is try to dehumanize the person. I don't want to see them mm-hmm. like that, because then I can't advocate for myself. But if I can see you through the eyes of compassion, then actually we're on that road towards collaboration and towards feeling like we're on the same side. And so however you can extend yourself is the best way.
Giving is a catalyst for the resolution of discord. I read an article some time ago that said that you should always borrow a book from your enemy.
Yeah, I remember that article.
Great idea.
Because that alchemy of giving has a transformational element to it, where even if you're not, like you said, you know, extend yourself and see, what can I give? Maybe there's not something that you can give, but you look on their bookshelf and say, oh man, it's one of my favorite authors. Now you and I don't disagree on a lot of things, but we have that in common.
Right.
Can I borrow that book?
Right.
And now they've given you something.
Right.
And then it's like, that's going to take some charge out of the issue. It's not going to solve everything, obviously, but any momentum toward any progress mm-hmm. towards peace is a step in the right direction. And you know, just a small thing like that can sometimes turn the tide.
It really can.
Right. What other actions would you recommend for people to cultivate the courage to make the first move in a positive way?
I would say cultivate gratitude. Mm-hmm. There's a gift in everything. Mm-hmm. You know, ask yourself, you know, itemize. Maybe you have to take a pen and pencil, a pen and some paper, and just write down a list of what am I grateful for in this moment. Mm-hmm. Even in this situation where somebody irritates the Fushnikins out of me, you know, it's like, what am I grateful for?
Well, you could write on a pencil with a pen, but it'd be a short list.
Yeah, it'd be a very short list. It's like, sometimes maybe you only get one or two items. But if you can identify something that you have, gratitude is the gateway. Mm-hmm. You know, if we can identify something we're grateful for, then we can start to humanize them. Mm-hmm. We can start accessing those parts of our brain that sees possibility instead of, you know, this is, you know, we just will never agree. We have to agree to disagree. No. When you mix gratitude in the mix, and all mm-hmm. of a sudden you start to see things you didn't see before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think empathy is the key, because there's one thing that my granddaddy taught me, and he wasn't a philosopher by any means. You know, he was a old Southern boy that, you know, became a multimillionaire in real estate and was, you know, pull himself up by his bootstraps kind of guy. But he said to me, Jeffrey, the man that had no shoes felt really bad for himself until he met the man that had no feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a point of gratitude there.
Yeah.
No matter how bad you think you got it, you know, you can have something that you can be grateful for. You know, even if the catalyst for that is looking at somebody who has it worse off than you,
right.
You know, there's still an opportunity that's a single point of gratitude. You can go from there.
It is. Now, Namaste, I keep seeing a lot in the chat room that there seems to be, for reasons that I can't begin to fathom, there seems to be this mindset among some ladies that men just don't get it, and that men are intimidated by women that have a brain and feel like they should be able to use it.
I know a lot of women do feel that way. That has not been my experience. And in my observation, we want to learn how to cultivate respect and appreciation for the distinctions between men and women. we behave, especially, you know, in the masculine and in the feminine, those things are very different. And so how men see the world, how they communicate, how their spirituality and all of that shows up is very distinct than how it shows up for us. And I think often as women, we assume or presume, because we aren't men, that because it's not showing up in a way that we can understand, that it's not there. All, you know, right? I know a lot of women who feel like because he doesn't say anything, he doesn't care. That's not true. Think that because he doesn't talk about spiritual all the time, he doesn't have a spiritual life. Also not true. You know, and so a lot of that is start here. And that is just, if you have a man in your life, from the place of non-judgment and genuine curiosity, ask him what he feels and how he looks at things. Just ask.
So instead of presuming that you know, instead of presuming that you know what's going on, and I know what he's doing, I know what he's thinking, I know he's just bad, he doesn't care. You were actually advocating that instead of creating all these negative fantasies in your mind about what's going on, you're actually advocating the radical therapy of asking a question.
Ask him.
That's groundbreaking. It's like, okay, game over, mic drop. It's like,
yes. And some women will say,
I've
actually had women say, well, I've asked him and he didn't say anything. To which I say, you have to be quiet after you ask. Because as women, we're used to talking. We talk a lot. We have a lot of words. And a lot of us have never heard our beloved make a complete statement. Because as soon as he pauses for a moment, we jump in to fill the air with words, because that's how we communicate. Women do that with each other all the time. We talk over each other. Men don't do that. And so when you ask him, if he says, well, let me think about that, then let him think about it and circle back around. If he's pausing and he's quiet, don't assume, oh, he doesn't have anything to say. Just be quiet until he speaks. You know, and I know that's kind of radical, but yeah, it does work.
And even for men and women, and I'm going to say this because I can be the bad guy if I need to be, a lot of times we want to complain about other people. They won't listen, they won't talk, they don't care, because we really don't want to take the time out to examine our own lives. I remember, Namaste and Richard, when I got divorced, and after 16 years of marriage, my wife decided to leave me. And I was dating one crazy person after another, drama, crazy. It was almost beyond belief. And I sat back, what's with all these crazy women? Until one day I sat back and I said, what is the common denominator in all of these relationships? And I realized the common denominator was Jeffrey Allen Daugherty. And that's hard to do for some people.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And you know, my experience is that it's hard to do for some people, it's hard to do for some men. It's also hard to do for many women, you know, to say, okay, yeah, it's me, you know, and not from the place of, it's not necessary. We always talk about, Richard and I talk about no shame, no blame. You know, it's not about trying to you need to shame yourself or blame yourself or get into self-judgment so much as it is just acknowledging that there is something that is unmet in me that keeps seeking this out. So let me resolve that so I can go on to have a happy relationship, you know, but let me look at that. If everyone I've ever been with has been the same kind of person.
Right.
Yeah.
Naming that thing, you know, in a lot of indigenous cultures, the whole idea of if you know something's name, it gives you power over it.
Yes.
Said, no victims, no villains, but even identifying it and saying, you know what, that is my issue. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, instead of just being behind your shoulder, just constantly whispering in your ear, you bring it out front. I have a sensitivity in that area. Then you can say, you know what, I'm going to choose not to let that take over my emotions, not to let that take over the relationship. But I its name.
Yes.
Now I've got some power over it. Yeah.
And then once we have it named and identified, then we can move on to that next step of self-development where we stop painting red flags green.
Yes.
Now, Richard helped the ladies earlier, Namaste, and they helped the ladies by saying that what a man really wants and needs is respect. I think that's so true. Namaste, could you help the men in the audience and tell us, I know it's kind of a broad brush, but tell us what are some of the essential things that women really want in need from men that maybe we may not understand?
There are a few. One of the biggest ones is there's a feminine need to be appreciated.
Appreciated.
And that appreciation, you know, we are the givers. We love to give, and we give differently. Men tend to give more towards the, you know, protection and provision and things of that nature, even to the point of direction. Whereas women, our giving tends to take the form, it's a lot softer in many ways. It's, you know, the nurturing and the, you know, oh, somebody's hurt, how do I feed you? How do I, you know, there's a much more emotional component to our giving. And frequently women feel unappreciated for what we give. Not because we don't want to give it, but because that appreciation is actually fuel for us to give more. In other words, more appreciation we receive, the more we get from our overflow without getting into depletion. And a lot of women feel like when they are in that giving mode, they don't get appreciated, which is why they begin to take on more masculine traits. Because I was in that more feminine space and I just got taken advantage of, and nobody saw me, nobody paid attention to me, and nobody ever said even so much as a thank you or gave me space to rest, you know, and things of that nature. And so we really need appreciation from men, probably more than anything else, and to be seen, and not you know, visually seen, that's important too, but to be seen as beautiful, complex entities, you know, in all of our complexity, you know, and we don't hear that. The same thing Richard was saying, like, no, a lot of men have never heard, I respect you. A lot of women have never heard, I really appreciate you. I see you. You know, and so we're running on E, the tank is empty. And when a woman's tank gets empty, you know, woe to the world, because she just is like, forget it, I'm not doing another thing, you know, and it's like, we call it going scorched earth. It's just like, done, yeah. You know?
And unfortunately, a lot of times in that situation, somebody outside the relationship might come along that starts to fill that tank a little bit.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happens. And then she's conflicted and she feels bad. And she, you know, then she's like, well, why is this happening? And And so it's unfortunate, but a lot of women don't feel appreciated and they don't know how to ask for it, because by the time many of us ask for it, the asking is tinged in anger and bitterness and resentment, you know, and it's even in we call it, you know, I'm finally going to care about myself, but we're doing it not from a place of, I just love myself so much, but from a place of, well, you're not doing it, so let me do it, you know. So it comes across in this very angry way, and anger is never a space that invites connection. So when she approaches him like that, usually he just shuts down and gives even less appreciation. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Absolutely. So Richard and Namaste, you know, there's a lot of people here today that are listening to you. Some of them may never listen to you again. Your paths may never cross again. If each of you would please, and we'll do ladies first, we'll ask Namaste to start. If you could leave the audience tonight with one central thought, one central theme, one central hope, that if you never speak to or hear from any of these people ever again, what would you, Namaste, like to leave with this audience?
I would like to leave that you are worthy of every good thing. Within every desire is the potential for its fulfillment. And so anything that you want, anything that you're longing for, if it's a relationship, if it's, you know, a different life, if it's career success, whatever it is, the fact that you long for it is what indicates that it's yours to have. And so just keep going in the direction of that. Don't wonder if God wants you to have it or if it's meant for you to have it. If it wasn't meant for you to have it, you wouldn't long for it.
I'm reminded, Namaste, you know, my background is as a minister for 20 years, and I'm reminded of the saying in the scriptures that says that the divine will give you the desires of your heart. And most people think, oh, he's going to give me the stuff that I want. No, that's not what it says. It says that the very desires of your heart, those things that you want, those desires are placed in you by the divine. And that speaks exactly to what you were communicating. And you're exactly 100% right. Thank you so much for that. Richard, what would you want to leave with this audience?
What I would want to say to them is that you can't screw this up. You know, thing, you know, because you come in and you hear that so much, right? You only get one shot. You only get one shot. No, this is an endless series of shots, and you've got so many chances. You've got so many opportunities. Mm-hmm. You can start again. You can begin again. You can change the trajectory of your life. And in fact, everything is proceeding in that way. That's why you end up in the places you end up in. That's why you're listening to this broadcast, and that's why you're where you are right now, because your heart's cry has been to the universe, I need something, I need something, I need something. And you're looking and seeing the answers that are right in front of you. You may not perceive them as such, but they're there. And it's going to keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. You can't screw this up. You're exactly where you are supposed to be, and you're going in a direction that is going to be ultimately good for you.
Right. And it just, as you were saying that, the words came to me very strong. The only way that we fail is if we quit.
Yes,
right. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So as long as we have the courage to continue to try to move forward, even if we don't get it right the first time. Mm-hmm. So if we can just, in a relationship sense, if we as men can learn to appreciate the significant ladies in our life, and Namaste, I would think that would go for not only your wife, but your mom, your sister,
yes.
your daughters, your grandmothers. If men can learn to appreciate and verbalize the appreciation to the significant women in their life, and if women could learn to verbalize respect towards the men, lovers, brothers, dads, grandfathers, that we really could see some profound change in our lives, and we can't screw it up.
That's right.
We can't screw that up.
That's right.
Unless we fail to try.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So tell us, as we leave, where people can find you. I know I've mentioned Richard and Namaste.com. How else can people avail themselves of the transformational truths that you're giving out?
We are on Facebook. We have a few Facebook pages. Mine is Namaste More, the Feminine Alchemist. And we also have Richard and Namaste. A Beautiful Life is our Facebook page. And we're also on YouTube at Richard and Namaste is our YouTube channel as well. So
and
we're all over. And the School of Alchemy is actually at schoolofalchemy.love.
Excellent. So I want to encourage everyone, if a chord has been struck by you tonight, visit with Richard and Namaste. There's a reason that we came together, and I'm sure some of you in the audience recognize the synchronicity between many of the things that I've been talking about and what Richard and Namaste brought to us here tonight. So folks, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. Of course, I want to thank Tamu for connecting us. And I really want to say to both of you, from the bottom of my heart, I do bless you. Namaste to each of you. And thank you so much for being here. It's been an honor and a privilege, and we hope to have you again.
Thank you. It's been our honor as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And folks, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. This has been The Gospel Truth, and we are glad to have you here. I salute all of you that are seeking truth, and do avail yourself of the great technologies and strategies that Richard and Namaste are offering to you. And until we see you again, remember, no original sin within. You've got the spark of divinity. Let's be excellent to ourselves. Be excellent to each other. For Richard and Namaste, and also Tamu and Gina, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, saying thank you and good night.
Good night.